Good evening. Today, Mark Carney, in his role as Prime Minister, announced Canada will match the U.S. with a 25% counter tariff on vehicles imported from the states that are not compliant with our trade agreement.
The ongoing trade war with the U.S. drags on. Canada's automakers are feeling the impact.
Donna, vehicles are Canada's second largest export by value at $51 billion. The vast majority of those, 93%, go to the U.S.
In just a matter of hours, President Trump will unveil new trade tariffs. This comes after a flurry of on-again, off-again tariffs on goods imported from several countries, including Canada, on top of new automotive tariffs set to go into effect tomorrow on foreign cars and parts.
North foreign cars and parts. North America, a geography that for many years offered perhaps the most vivid example of the concept of cross-border partnership. The automotive trade between Canada and the U.S. flowed like the internal lines of a single country, with parts made in the same factory, traveling from Ontario to Detroit and onto the Pacific coast. Somehow, this bond of friendship evolved into the rhetoric of a trade war, when Washington once again brought protectionist tariffs to the table. For many years, Canada and the United States, like two sister countries of North America, have been almost inseparable in automotive production. Some parts from the same factory went to Detroit, some to Ontario, and tens of billions of dollars worth of vehicles and spare parts flowed annually, as if the border did not exist. So what has happened now that this harmony has broken down? And why is Canada imposing a 25% tariff on US-made vehicles, in a move that seems to say enough is enough? After Trump's harsh measures against automobile imports, it has long been a matter of curiosity on what economic and political grounds the Carney government would tit for tat, effective April 9, 2025. How will this tariff affect the flow of tens of billions of dollars of vehicles and spare parts between the two countries? This will be a nightmare for everyone, from the massive assembly line in Ontario to the parts manufacturer in Tennessee. What's more, could this decision radically change the future of both Tesla and giant brands like Ford and GMC in the Canadian market? Here we take a behind-the-scenes look at this stunning retaliation. The latest situation in the tensions between the US and Canada, at which companies could be hit by billions of dollars in losses. Beforehand, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this post to follow our content and meet us quickly for the next one. Canada's 25% tariff, which came into effect on April 9, 2025, sent a message to the world that a new era is beginning in the North American automotive ecosystem. The rumors we had been hearing for months became a reality as U.S. President Trump's protectionist policies came into full effect. When the U.S. imposed harsh tariffs on automobile imports, including Canada, Ottawa was quick to retaliate. We have to protect our sovereignty. We can't give in, the country chanted. And on April 2nd, the determination to do so became official. Prime Minister Mark Carney said in a press statement the next day, "We cannot tolerate this abuse of our friendship. From now on, cars, trucks and vans originating in the U.S. will have to pay a 25% tariff." Prime Minister Mark Carney said in a press release, announcing perhaps one of the sharpest trade moves in Canadian history. This is a tit for tat against Trump and Elon Musk, as giant brands from Tesla to Ford and GMC will suffer billions of dollars in losses, commented some on social media. So what is the real story behind the scenes, and how much financial damage can we talk about? By the end of 2024, Canada had an export volume of $400 billion, a significant portion of which was in the automotive sector. Automotive exchanges with the U.S. amounted to $80 billion. Under the tariff-free arrangement between the two countries, American firms had easy access to Canadian consumers. But on April 2, 2025, Washington imposed permanent tariffs on automobiles, forcing Ottawa to respond compulsorily. We're not happy about making this move, but Trump policies are forcing us to retaliate here, Carney's government said. Recent public opinion polls show that more than 65% of the public supports the idea that retaliation against us, arbitrary actions, is necessary, particularly in provinces such as Ontario and Quebec. The percentage in favor of Canadian non-submission is even higher. According to reports in the American media, Trump did not expect this to be the case. As a result of lobbying by companies such as Tesla and Ford, a formula to exempt Canada from the tariffs was sought but failed. This accelerated Carney's reaction. We have to look for a different way forward. This is precisely where the Trump and Elon Musk are going crazy narrative circulating on social media comes from. Both Tesla and the traditional giants saw the Canadian market as a side, but very profitable area, for example. In 2024, Tesla sold about 22,000 vehicles in Canada, reached a turnover of $1.5 billion, and even benefited from incentives worth $43 million. Now the incentives have been cancelled, and a 25% tariff has come into effect. Some experts predict that Tesla may face an additional loss of more than $500 million within the year with this blow, which could be reflected in the shares and evaporate the market value of $2 to $3 billion. An economist from the University of Ontario said Tesla, which dominates the electric vehicle market, will now be perceived as more expensive and pro-Trump. In the eyes of the Canadian consumer, this loss of perception could lead to long-term sales losses. Ford and GMC are experiencing a similar situation. GMC was already making billions of dollars a year in sales by bringing pickup and SUV models produced in the US to Canada. Ford has manufacturing centers in Canada, such as its Oakville plant, but most of its critical models still come from the US now. They won't survive the 25% surtax. Canadian importers will have to reflect this additional burden on prices, and the end consumer will face an increase of $3,000 to $5,000. Customers who do not want to pay such a big price may turn to more affordable Asian or European brands. In general, American brands have been the clear leaders in the pickup segment, but now that the Canadian consumer will be hit with an additional cost of several $1,000s, the shift to other options will accelerate, experts say. This could reduce GMC and Ford's market share by 10 to 15% by the end of 2025, leaving the companies with billions of dollars in losses. Some optimists say the companies could avoid the tariff by expanding production in Canada, but this is difficult in the short term. Factory construction and labor adjustments would take years. Stock market analysis confirms everything. On the morning of April 3rd, American automotive stocks fell between 2 to 4%. Tesla fell nearly 4 points, continuing the wave of collapses in recent weeks. Experts say it would be ambitious to say that stocks have fallen this much because of the Canadian move, but it definitely creates additional downward pressure. Leaks from Elon Musk's close circle show that the company is looking for a solution to what can we do, but said shifting production to Canada is a big investment. Let's find an intermediate strategy until the customs duty is lifted. This uncertainty also makes Tesla investors uneasy. Although some investors are hopeful that Tesla, which has expanded factories in Germany and China, can add Canada. Musk has concerns such as not losing incentives in the US likewise. It is unclear how Ford and GM will manage the fresh crisis in Canada as they focus on the domestic market, with electric vehicle incentives from the Biden administration. The Ottawa administration often repeats the sovereignty issue rhetoric. On the night of April 2nd, Prime Minister Carney said, "Trump's protectionism once again is unacceptable to us. The free entry of U.S. automobiles is over." On social media, it is only natural that this sparked a debate on, is Canada breaking away from the U.S. after NAFTA? The automotive sector was one of the most closely integrated areas under North American trade agreement. Now this tariff wall has struck an axe in its belly. Perhaps Canada will deepen its automotive cooperation with Europe and Asia. Outside the US, this may be what Carney means when he says there are other markets. Signals from European and Asian brands suggest that the idea of establishing a production base in Canada and exporting to the US could quickly become a reality. Of course, the Trump administration is well aware that these steps would completely differentiate the North American ecosystem. But what will all this ultimately mean for the huge trade flows between the US and Canada? Official figures suggest that $80 billion of the $720 billion in trade in 2024 will be automotive products. With a 25% tariff, this volume is expected to shrink by up to 30%, resulting in a loss of $25 billion. American manufacturers will bear most of this loss, while Canadian consumers will face higher prices. There's a widespread view in the industry that everyone will lose. But the motive behind the policy is retaliation for continued Trump tariffs. We won't back down unless Trump backs down. It's such a lose-lose rather than win-win pattern. No one is expected to favor a peaceful solution in the short term. On social media, the question why did Trump and Elon Musk panic is being discussed, while Trump's America First policy still enjoys mass support in the polls. Such a swift and massive response from his northern neighbor throws the calculations out of whack. Tesla was already receiving partial incentives under Biden and was now in an advantageous position in Canada. But the subsidy cancellation on March 25th and the 25% tax on April 9th mean a huge loss for the company. Worse, Canadian consumers are becoming increasingly cold to American brands. Some protesters have called Tesla a symbol of Trump's trade impositions. Other brands may face similar perceptions, while the Trump camp thought Canada can't be that brave. They saw the truth when Carney said, "The tariffs are actually being implemented." That's why the expression, hysterical panic, is circulating on Twitter and various news portals, of course. This may be an exaggeration, but our expectations about Washington-Ottawa relations in the post-Biden era have been dashed. The Canadian public is supportive, because the Trump tariffs have victimized Canadian producers in many areas from steel to dairy products. Since the automotive sector has a large share, it feels like a final push. Canada is trying to show its national will, but in the long run it may struggle without the U.S. market. Some economists say the Carney team, on the other hand, believes that such a handover will not be easy. Of course, but the Canadian market of 43 million consumers has the power to find alternatives, and that they are planning new trade partnerships. For some, the interest of European and Asian brands in manufacturing in Canada will bear fruit in a short time. But some analysts argue that such large investments take 5 to 10 years, and American giants cannot be excluded suddenly. After all, polls show that nearly 70% of Canadians approve of the idea of not backing down on tariffs, and that if the U.S. is imposing it, this is what we can do. The policy is likely to continue based on this support in the coming months. The competitive balance in the North American automotive market could change radically. If the 25% tax continues, American giants like Ford, GM and Tesla will be at a price disadvantage, while rivals like Toyota, Volkswagen and Hyundai will grab share. Tesla could lose the Canadian customer and suffer a revenue decline of more than $500 million. By the end of the year, it is estimated that GM and Ford could also face losses of at least $3 to $5 billion as U.S. stock markets suffer additional losses. Elon Musk or other CEOs may seek negotiations with Carney's government, but it appears that Carney will say no, as long as Trump policies continue. This is a picture of a full-blown sabers-drawn trade war. I wonder if the U.S. will take a step back and say let's exclude Canada. So far there is not much signal on the contrary. Trump may harden. That's why social media is summarizing. The end of all this noise is either a complete rupture or a big deal. What do you think? Will Canada's 25% tariffs give the U.S. automotive giants the biggest trade shock of the millennium? Or will the storm soon blow over? Are predictions of billions of dollars in losses for companies like Tesla and Ford exaggerated or realistic? Trump and Elon Musk's so-called hysterical panic perhaps reflects the anxiety that we underestimated Canada. Now we will pay the price. Please don't forget to share your comments, like this podcast, and subscribe to our channel. Trade relations in North America are experiencing perhaps the biggest rift in 50 years. We will continue to bring you the developments moment by moment. See you again in our next broadcast and take care.